thank the Lord for that opportunity. I appreciate it, and it's good to be with you. And I just wanted to say that sitting back here, I got a perspective about the balcony. And I attended a church in Warren, Ohio that had a balcony. And somehow I always gravitated to the balcony. And I know the air up there is a little bit different. And if you stayed up to watch the Ohio State game, I'll be watching you. I did that. But as an ex-football coach, I couldn't go to bed. But it's good to be with you in the balcony, and thank you so much, choir, for your wonderful music. Appreciate it so much. Thank you. Driving up here this morning, it was a beautiful morning. And first of all, you saw the moon, didn't you? Either last night or this morning. The harvest was just beautiful. And you always, for me anyhow, God always seems to put signs in the nature that kind of helps you have a sense of His presence, doesn't He? And the other thing I was doing driving up here, I was watching the road, really, but I thought about the occasions I've had to come to Norwalk first, and there's been numerous occasions. But I wanted to share with you my first time that Norwalk First became prominent to me. I had just moved to Westfield Center. That's where I retired to now, but I served the church there for 8 years, and it was essentially my first day on the job. I was still unpacking, and just to share with you, at that point in its life, the church was really in dire straits. I mean, they were concerned that they would have to close the doors, and the district superintendent, and you can tell Doug this, that all the district superintendents just go give them hope. And so I was it was my first day, and I'm out in the yard just kind of dealing, and I'm thinking to myself, excuse me for a minute, I'll have to battle this. You know, one of the differences between Brian and I, he's right-handed and I'm left-handed. So trying to put this on and keep it on my ear has been a challenge. But anyhow, I'll get it here. Okay, thank you. Okay, we'll see how that does. Well, where was I in the story? I was driving up here, and so I moved into Westfield Center, and I'm out there in the yard, and it's my first day, and I'm thinking to myself, we need young people in the church, really bad. And so I'm primed and ready to, go visit or find young people who would come to our church. Well, lo and behold, I'm out there, and all of a sudden I see this young man and this young woman with a baby carriage, and they're coming my direction. So, I probably attacked them, but I stopped them and I said, hello, I'm the new minister, Larry Marshall. What's your name? And the young man shook my hand and says, I'm Dave Scavuzzo. and he introduced his wife, Angie, and their little baby. And I said, it's probably obvious, but I'd sure love to have you come to our church. They lived in the town. Well, he said, well, Larry, I'd be happy to come to the church, but I just got called to Norwalk First as the associate. I'll be leaving tomorrow. And so Dave and I, our paths have intersected over the years, and of course we love Dave and Angie, and he's at Strongsville right now, and so I have occasion to go up and talk with them, but it's interesting to me how God will put you in touch with people where you begin to share about your journey, your faith journey, and you say, wow, isn't that powerful? It's kind of one of those aha kind of things, And so that's what I'd like us to think about this morning. This morning I'd like you to consider your call, that we are all called into ministry. And next week, gosh, you're going to have to deal with me again. Next week we're going to talk about confirming our call and being able to grow in our faith spiritually and how we get filled with the fullness of God. And I'm getting excited about next week already. But today I want us to think about, because so often we don't think about, God's call upon our lives. Let me start with Bar Harbor, Maine. How many of you have ever been to Bar Harbor, Maine? Oh, a few of you. Isn't it beautiful? And one of the neat things about Bar Harbor, Maine, and the first time my wife and I went there, we heard, about the ocean, and you could go whale watching, and we did that. And then the little town where it's, all the quaint shops and everything, and there's also the Acadia National Forest there. And there's all kinds of trails. And neat thing about it, you can walk in the trails, and in the summertime, which we went, you can go and just pick blueberries. They're just fresh blueberries. They're beautiful. So anyhow, this beautiful place, we're one day having lunch, my wife and I, and there was this walking trail around the lake right by where we had lunch, and so we decided to do that. It was about a 3.5 mile walk. And so we're walking down the path, and it's a nice wide path. And suddenly, I don't know which one of us noticed that there was another path that kind of went up this, and it's very hilly, Bar Harbor in the forest there. And I'll blame it on my wife because she's not here. But anyhow, one of us said, we ought to see how that goes, because if it goes up to the top, just imagine the scenery. Just imagine what we could see at the top of that mountain. So we did. And we started down this path, and it was not unlike the path we were on, except for it ended very quickly as we went up. And then it was just filled with boulders and trees. So we're trying to negotiate going this way and going that way and trying to reach the destination we wanted to reach and take in that beautiful scenery that God had provided. And we're struggling because we're not quite sure how, what the way was to get up there. So we're about ready to consider going back down and take the comfortable trail around the lake. And all of a sudden I see this couple coming down the mountain, and it seems that they're doing it with ease. So I happened to say hi to them, and I said, how do you find your way up the mountain here? I mean, it's difficult going through these boulders and through the trees. And they said, look for the blue line on the rock. And so we did. And lo and behold, and it wasn't that it was completely obvious, but once you started looking for it, every once in a while you saw this blue line that basically gave you direction on how to negotiate the rocks and the trees. And it was because of the blue line, being aware of that we made it to the top of the mountain. And I got to tell you, it was breathtaking. It was one of those times where you could kind of just, and you've probably had those where it's so beautiful, you just take it in, you kind of breathe in the presence of God. Well, I wonder if you've ever been looking for a blue line. And in the ups and downs of life, that's kind of what our lifeline looks like, doesn't it? I always say that our faith journey is like a heartbeat, that if it's just going like that, it's probably not real alive. But that's what I want us to think about, is our journey to experience the presence and the beauty of God through Jesus Christ. And many years ago, my wife and I did this study called Serendipity. And maybe some of you have done it over the years. It started back in the mid-'70s. A man named Lyman Coleman kind of invented this small group ministry. And he called it Serendipity because what he wanted to see happen is that people would gather together and in small groups, whether it be 2s, 4s, or 8s, during the conversation about our lives and how God intersected our lives, God broke through. Aha! There's that blue line that I was looking for. God broke through. And I remember going to the introduction to this. It was in Cleveland. It was like an 8-hour day. And I met this person that I'd never met before, and we were kind of there together for 8 hours. We shared our stories together, and by the time we left, we knew a lot about each other. And we were able to affirm each other, and we had a sense that God wanted us to follow him in a very powerful way? Well, that's what I want you to do, is consider that you are called into ministry, that you have a faith journey where God maybe has intersected your life. You have a lifeline, a journey of faith, and you've maybe had ups and downs, whatever the case might be. But think about that blue line. Did God touch your life there? Maybe that was God calling you into ministry. Now, I know the story. Only professional ministers are called, right? That's what everybody believes. You know, that was back in the 500s AD, where the Reformation took place. That was part of the Reformation, was the fact that there was this priesthood of believers idea, all persons are ministers. And the Bible became available to the common layperson, and guess what? New movements began, including Methodism. People experienced a call to ministry. So you saw the theme in the bulletin, right? That, you know, God doesn't call the qualified. Well, I'm an example of that. I want to tell you. I was a high school teacher and football coach when God called me into ministry. And when I decided that God wanted me to follow him and go to seminary, I wrote letters to a lot of the different United Methodist seminaries throughout the country. And most of the responses were thanks, but no thanks. Because they saw my college grades, for one, which really weren't very good. I know that. I did too many bad things in college. I wasn't focused on studies. So some of them said you weren't qualified because you didn't do well, even though that was 7 years before. And others kind of told me, well, you know, you need to go back to undergraduate school, even though I had an undergraduate degree from Bowling Green State University. And you need to have more philosophy and sociology, because I was a PE major, health and physical education. I was a coach. You're not qualified. One seminary said, come on down. And I did. And God blessed us, my wife and I, and we have been in ministry for over 35 years. You see, lay people, what we don't think about sometimes is the fact that God calls us as lay people. We then seek to follow where God is leading us. And I want to say to you that God provides these blue lines if we are seeking to be faithful, where we will be touched and we will then have a sense that God's call is upon you and upon me, and it stirs our heart in powerful ways. In other words, we're motivated to follow. Well, that's where John 15 comes in. John 15 is the chapter gives us imagery, and John's very good at, he presents Jesus and saying, I am this, or I am that, I am the good shepherd. Well, here in John 15, Jesus says, I am the vine, and you are the branches. Apart from me, you can do nothing. So the picture is, stay connected to Jesus. And the key word that you heard in the scripture reading was, abide in me. Abide in my work. Abide in my words. Abide in my love. Do you ever think about abide, that word abide, what that means? As I think about it, I think it gives me that at-home feeling. Like I'm at home with somebody. It's family. It's intimate. And you're connected through love. That's the picture I receive, and that's exactly what Jesus says, is stay connected to me. Oh, wonderful. So it seems to me that as we journey along in life, one of the first steps in sensing the call to ministry is follow Jesus. stay connected to Jesus. Because then Jesus says, that there will be a new relationship. And the new relationship is that I would no longer call you servants. And that doesn't mean we don't continue to serve as servants. But he says, because the servant doesn't know the master's business. But everything the Father has given to me, I give to all of you. Wow. So we are equipped through what Jesus gives to us. And we can cite what Pentecost was all about. Those disciples who were afraid, those disciples who doubted, those disciples who betrayed and denied, and yet at Pentecost, what happened to them? They were empowered. They weren't rich. They didn't have any titles. I mean, we had fishermen. We had a tax collector. They were sinners. We had women who followed, like Mary Magdalene, who Jesus had healed. So the qualifications had nothing to do with a title or how rich you were or what your station in life might have been. Are you willing to follow me? Are you willing to stay connected and abide in me? And if so, Pentecost happens in our lives. That during our faith journeys, we find that blue line and we begin to continue the journey of our faith. Finally, Jesus says, a friend lays down his life for others, right? And Paul had talked about the message of the cross, that it's foolishness for those who are perishing, but for those who are being saved, it is the power and wisdom of God. And so when we focus on the cross with faith, we say, thank you, Jesus. Thank you for that amazing grace. Thank you for that blessed assurance. And it's that propels us, dear friends, to continue to follow the Lord. And finally, at the end of the text that was read, Jesus said, you didn't choose me. I chose you to go and bear fruit that lasts. And he gives us a commandment to love one another as he has loved us. Well, how did Jesus love us? He gave his life for us. So we need to love one another as Jesus has loved us. That's agape love. That's love with no strings attached. It's, in a sense, living out the great commandment, to love God with all our heart, soul, mind, and strength, and love our neighbor as ourselves. That is powerful. It's not easy, because sometimes as we're traveling around the rocks and the trees of life, guess what? We lose our way. We're wondering what the way forward is, and what can we do? We can turn to prayer. And God touches us so that we can again go out and live out the Great Commission and the Great Commandment. So, this morning I'd like us to consider that God has called us. Even for us who sit in the balcony or wherever we sit, I guarantee you, Jesus is the risen Christ. And today, if we are inspired to follow Jesus day by day and abide in him, God will touch our life. And periodically, we will find that blue line that will take us forward. And we will be inspired. And we will be the church of Jesus Christ. And it will be exciting and powerful. Let us consider our call.